Welcome to the Digital Signage Today podcast. I'm Judy Model, editor of Digital Signage Today. Our podcast today is all about turning a digital signage possibility into reality in the corporate environment. Our guests are Amber Ward, Senior Marketing Director at Carousel Digital Signage, and Cullen Gross, Sales Engineer at Carousel Digital Signage. So for more than 25 years, Carousel has been a trusted digital signage platform for corporate organizations, educational institutions, and government agencies. It's recognized as one of Digital Signage Today's top 12 digital signage providers, and is built for real-world communication, helping organizations reliably inform and engage their audiences. So from supporting emergency messaging when it matters most, to serving as a centralized platform for everyday communication across an organization. Carousel ensures the right message reaches the right people at the right time. On February 26th, Carousel and Amazon will co-host a webinar starting at 1 p.m. Central. Enterprise signage made simple, secure, scalable, IT trusted. It's a webinar not to miss because it's going to cover topics and considerations for anyone supporting a digital signage rollout or deployment, and it's going to give a deep look into the topics that are of interest and concern to IT networking and IT overall departments, because IT and networking are critical to a successful digital signage deployment. So thanks for being here, Amber and Cullen.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, so why don't we kick off with you each kind of sharing a little bit about your role and your background.
All right. My name is Amber Ward. I'm the Senior Marketing Director at Carousel Digital Signage. I generally spend my days building strategies and telling stories that connect with people beyond the technology. I've been with the company for just about 18 years, I think coming up in May. I started off as a graphic designer and worked my way up, and love building those strategies to help connect with people and help connect them with the digital signage and solve their problems.
Very good. I'm Cullen Gross. I'm the sales engineer over here at Carousel. I've been in the AV space for 18 years. I've been at Carousel for almost 10. Kind of the biggest part of my role is that I help customers identify both their technical and practical requirements as far as, communication goes and getting digital signage up and running.
Wow.
He's our guru. We love him at Carousel.
Yeah, I mean, with your background, you guys have both seen so many changes and so much innovation in the last 10 to 18 years.
Yeah,
it's always changing.
Yeah, and actually, when I started, as I said, I started as a graphic designer. One of my main jobs was creating channels, so the content that goes on the screen. And back then, it was really like, you didn't see what you see now, right? People put a lot more thought into what is displayed. And, there's much more of a marketing approach towards what content goes on there. So even just thinking back from where we started to where we are now is a big leap.
Right, because it's just gotten much more complex. But, when there are people who still think of digital signage as like the screen on the wall. So what would surprise them about what it can actually do today?
Yeah, I think maybe this is less about what it can do and more about what it's actually driving. Okay. So digital signage can be many things, but the most effective thing it can be is a strong communication tool. It's evolved from something flashy and eye-catching to something far more valuable, like a trusted go-to source for information. Everyone is always looking for the next new thing, the next new feature, the next new bauble. But sometimes the surprise is that signage works best when it's just doing its job, right? Clear communication delivered consistently to the people who need it. That's what actually drives impact.
And I might add too that something that might surprise people is that it's much less these days just contained to the screen on the wall. Right? Like when you have a message that's very exacting and very intentional, sometimes it applies in more than just that screen, right? So I think what surprises people is when we talk about making big impacts, we can do that with less actions than we used to before, right? So a message might still go on a screen, but that could also be automatically posted to like an intranet site or users' phones or desktops or meeting rooms. I think what can really surprise people is that with one action, it's a much bigger impact than it has been previously when it was just the screens on the wall.
Right. And then you're reaching people beyond the wall, right? You're reaching them where they're at. Because some people don't have an office, a typical office that they sit at to get those communications.
Right.
Yeah, I think what will surprise people the most is that digital signage is really digital communication, right? And then it's like more of a holistic solution to communication gaps than it ever was before.
Right. So, a lot of organizations, they tend to lead with the technology when they're talking about digital signage, right? Why do you think starting with what's possible is a much more effective strategy?
Well, I'm always looking for innovative ways to connect with people beyond the technology itself. So whether that's supporting student wellness in higher education, helping create a safer environment through emergency messaging, or engaging employees campus-wide, my goal is to connect on a human level first before we ever get technical. I think people have a hard time visualizing, right? So when you show people what could be, what's possible, it becomes much easier for them to visualize themselves in that space.
Exactly. And before I ever bring up like features or even the product, right, it's always asking who, what, why, how, right? Like who is managing this content? Why is this important for users? How is it best obtained by those users, right? When you actually like lay out the problem, the solution kind of falls into place. And then the features are only there to help enable that versus leading with the features and then finding, well, what would I use that for, right? So coming the other direction is just much more impactful to end users.
And I would think that, somebody, especially an organization new to digital signage, they really don't have a clue of the possibilities. And, Cullen, when you said the five questions, that automatically hit in my head about journalism, because when you tell a story, those are all the things you have to incorporate. And digital signage is very much about storytelling these days. So how does Carousel help, or how are you guys helping people actually see it in action?
Yeah. So, well, it's not easy to picture the impact before screens go live, right? If you're getting ready to do a digital signage rollout across your entire campus, you may get to the end of your signage journey if you haven't planned correctly, and you have screens in the wrong places that aren't reaching your intended audience. We don't want that, right? So we built a tool that connects the vision to the final installation and makes what's possible feel real, allowing people to like really connect all the dots right from the start. It's an immersive, interactive experience that allows people to basically drop themselves into a space, much like their own, a corporate environment, and experience what really great communication could and should look like in their facility.
So to help the people listening or watching our video, is there a way for them to participate?
Yes. Let's see here. I'm going to share my screen. And I believe there will also be a link available in the story that people can follow along with, because I know we've got people listening at home and then people watching at home. So if you're listening, go hit up the webpage and click the link, and you can click around and take a look at what we're poking around with here. All right. All right. So this is the immersive experience I was talking about. Basically, it plops people right into a space, much like their own, a corporate environment, and walks through all the spaces in which you'd see digital signage in this particular facility. So right here, you can see we've got a wayfinding for a building directory. We poke over here, and we've got your welcome signage in the lobby. You can click through the entire space and get an idea of where you would see that signage. I'm just going to click on the floor plan here and bring you around this way, as this is going to be a little bit easier to jump around. So if we go into a meeting room, you can see, okay, we've got people attending meetings and coming in pre-meeting, getting settled. You can have information on the screen, meeting agenda, things like that. If we go outside of the room and turn around here, you can see we have information that you can display on a tablet outside of the meeting room. So letting people know, this room is in use or what's happening in that space at that time. We've got huddle spaces. This is another space that you'll see within the corporate environment where people are congregating. Maybe they're on their coffee break or just meeting with some colleagues. Break room. You can see we can reach people while they're enjoying their time off from work. Catch them in those moments that you can really grab their attention.
And kind of while we're going through this, right, like as a customer, right, and because we're asking those questions from before, like who's doing the content, what content, they can kind of visualize spaces, and then they start asking their own questions like, okay, what's important in this space, right? Like the meeting room, maybe it's important to put my logo and like our like corporate mission, right? And like the meeting that's coming up. Like then they start kind of connecting the space to the messages, and then they start doing that internally, and then things become very impactful, very effective.
Another way in which digital signage can be a very useful communication tool is during an emergency. Right. So I'm going to just click this here, and it's going to go through a little video of what happens. And Cullen, if you would like to sort of talk along with this regarding Common Alert Protocol, go for it.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of well, we have a lot of customers of ours will like want to have all these screens, but then sometimes there's a moment when all the screens need to do some sort of unified messaging. And that can be, of course, something like an emergency, something like a fire alarm's getting pulled, or even just it's someone's birthday, you want to take over all the screens. Right. The idea here is that Carousel can tie into external systems like emergency alert systems that do that all the time. They're sending emails, they're sending text messages, they're calling emergency services, but also it can message us through the Common Alert Protocol to take over all those screens and put that applicable message up without anyone having to log in or do that manually.
Right. Or go anywhere, right?
Right, exactly. Or log in, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, to me, what's so dynamic about this is that I think a lot of organizations just starting out, especially, kind of have a one-dimension view. It's a big, tall display, and it's got to fit somewhere. And in that walkthrough, the magic is that you almost don't even know they're displays. In a way, like it just conforms.
They just fit the environment.
Yeah, like environment. And they're not like jarring, and they're not like, distracting. And, because you are in a workplace and you want to keep everybody working, right?
Right.
But that's what caught my eye is like all the form factors and all the ways to get it there, but not be obtrusive, and the other idea is that, a lot of people don't jump in and do like 27 screens, right? So in a way that walkthrough kind of shows you, all right, let's start with that front room. Let's start with personally, I would start with like an emergency thing, but, and then they can always add in, right? And I'm wondering when you show people this, is the next question is like, how do you make that happen? Or like, where do they go?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people will see something like that and they'll think like, this is cool, but I don't know how I would ever achieve this. Like there's so many moving parts because like we have the different screen sizes, the different types of screens, right? The different technology that's out there. It can be a pretty daunting task, right? Even if you see something that's cool and compelling, you might be like, well, like that's a lot of lemons to squeeze to get this orange juice, right? So I think that sort of the big thing for us, right, when it comes to talking to a customer is really sort of acting as a trusted advisor, right? And like, of course, narrowing it down to what's the most important for them, right? Helping them navigate through what their options are, giving them options that's going to fit them, right? And then really sort of taking a very specific intentional message, getting it out effectively in a small scale, and then just building up from there. And then usually that kind of approach is a much easier kind of bite of the apple for someone to take. And then they can expand over time. And it's less of a big project and kind of more of an easing ebb and flow of signage.
Yeah, and then you can wrap your head around what you're really going to do with this, right? So when you're starting small, you can, figure out that audience, figure out that location. What am I going to say? What do I need to say? And then once you have that, you have that solid ground, you can move on from there.
Right? Because everywhere you have a display, you kind of have a package to put together, like you mentioned, Cullen. And content's a big part of that, obviously. And the content's going to change. From whatever you need for it. Um, so when we're looking at all this, and that video walkthrough was amazing. I mean, I remember years ago there was a clunky little app where you can see how your couch might look in your room. Remember that? But now it's almost real life.
Yeah.
And given that Carousel's been around 25 years and you guys have been around so much, what have you seen that's changed? And then in the next step, where do you see digital signage going?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Judy. I think sometimes it's important for us to acknowledge what hasn't changed first, right? Like when we talk about just signage, right? Ever since like the first stone was etched with a message, or someone took a wood board and painted it, putting it up on a storefront, right? The root cause, like the root issue, is always a communication gap between the person and the audience that they're trying to reach, right? So that hasn't changed. What has changed for sure is definitely audiences, like how they like to access content, right? And I think a very effective thing about digital signage still is it's where they physically are. But I think that what we look forward to in the future, and the challenge of the future, is we want to reach people no matter where they are, right? Where it's still applicable. So the idea of being able to use like Carousel's content feeds or a Carousel Daily app to be able to reach a user on their phone in a way that's not intrusive, right? Or to have a IT team be able to have content on screensavers or embedded on their intranet site. Like these are all things where when we approach this from a digital communication standpoint, we're much more effective because that message has so much intent these days. And I think that that's what I'm pretty excited. That's a pretty exciting challenge to have, is how do we spread a message without being so intrusive? And I think that we're making some pretty good steps towards that.
Yeah. Look, good communication is at the root of everything, right? I always say that. Take digital signage out of the equation. Good communication is at the root of everything. When communication breaks down, everything unravels. Strategy, culture, safety, trust, they all depend on clarity, right? Communication isn't a layer on top. It's the foundation. And really, it's the heart of what we do at Carousel, right? So I always say that, good communication, root of everything.
I think today's shoppers, consumers, just neighborhood residents, they're expecting it. They want it. I think it's not going to ever be intrusive at this point because so many people are so adept to the mobile devices, and they know how to turn away if they want to turn away. But I just wrote about a campus that put signage out, on their ball fields, and I thought that was miraculous because when I was going to college, if there was a tornado warning, I had no clue. These are necessary tools at this point, and I think everybody wants that communication. So to wrap up, what do you guys want to give as a tip to somebody listening or watching and thinking, all right, I'm gonna move into digital signage? What would be the first tip you would give them?
I think as a marketer, I think the first thing I would say is, what do you want to say? What are you trying to communicate? And who are you trying to communicate to? If you know that, moving forward will be one step easier to that finish line.
Yeah, I guess my tip would be, don't approach the problem as I need digital signage. Find your communication gap. I can't reach this user, I can't reach this group, right? Identify those problems, and we'll show you multiple ways to solve that problem.
Well, it's been great having you on the podcast, Amber and Cullen. Anybody wants to catch up on past podcasts, check out digitalsignagetoday.com. You'll find all our podcasts on the right nav bar, and we have a YouTube channel. But thanks again for being here, guys.